And even after completing it, you want to touch those that you didn't have time to. That's the whole Stalker. For every 2 minuses, there's 1 plus, but what a plus. Let's say there are only 2 of the 3 unique parameters left, bugs and atmosphere, but it's enough for now to believe in what's happening. All this took me about 3 to 4 hours. And while I was doing all this, something else could have broken, which I would have found out about at the most unexpected moment. There are lucky ones who avoided such soft locks, but many had almost the full set of the same problems. And it seems that it also depends on which storyline branch you follow. Perhaps by the time the review came out, we had already fixed the patches. But for me, without dancing with a tambourine, the game would have been unbeatable, and it is unlikely that everyone would go so far in an attempt to fix everything. This is especially true on consoles, where you can't set up any debug mode. In short, the game technically needs to be polished, and as quickly as possible. I clipped into a box. Fuck. Stealth. In fact, I would have told you all sorts of things, but you won't watch a review for an hour, so let's get to the bottom line. Somewhere in the first quarter of the game, one of the heroes asks, "What do you think about the zone?" And then I could only answer, "I don't know." And after all these dozens of hours, it's really hard for me to decide. On the one hand, the exclusion zone is made wonderfully, and you just want to crawl all over it. The gameplay, when nothing breaks, is pleasant. Yes, in some places it's already outdated, but it's exactly the same. The plot is interesting to follow, the quests reveal the world, and the setting here is unique and even supplemented with a bunch of different details. On the other hand, technically everything works very badly at the level of the Clear Sky release. And they tore out the main feature of the series with Alive by the roots, trying to fill this fool with quests, a plot and characters glued to locations. Surely Stalker fans can fix a lot, and there are even mods that at least fix sudden spawns of enemies near the player. But the modders won't create the Alive system. The developers say that there are several problems with the Alive 2.0 system. They know about them and are working on fixes, and they also promise multiplayer, which, in general, few people need. Now, S.T.A.L.K.E.R 2.0000 resembles a movie set, and you even believe in it until you start actively testing its strength, and often the game itself destroys it. But the paradox is that I didn't want to destroy this set. I didn't want to turn off the game, and I felt like I was back in that very exclusion zone. It changed, but at the same time remained the same. As a result, we got a real representative of the S.T.A.L.K.E.R series, which was empty for 15 years, with a lot of problems. If it wasn't interesting to play, then I would have given it a passable one, without a twinge of conscience. And for those who didn't like the original Stalkers, this is a walkthrough, no doubt. There's nothing to look for there. Don't even try. But I'm doing the review, and I really love the series. And if you played the previous parts as enthusiastically as I did, then returning to the world of the zone and finding out what happened there during your absence is commendable. But so far with a very big minus and only after the patches for the Game Pass. In fact, I really doubted the rating, but almost all the quests draw you into the world, forcing you to close your eyes to many shortcomings. In the process, you will learn about awareness and about monoliths, about several global changes in the arrangement of forces in the zone, and along the way you will meet many familiar characters. But if you have not played S.T.A.L.K.E.R before, then I think it will be neither hot nor cold. Something was there, some groups, and so on. Of course, a brief explanation can be found in the dialogues, but not so globally. And since we are talking about the plot, let me touch on the voice acting. There are 2 of them, Ukrainian and English. Their moods, as it seemed to me, are slightly different. There is more pathos and colors in English, and the Ukrainian is calmer or something. There are problems with timings and lip sync in both places. There is also a bug from time to time that the effect of the radio or gas mask of the speaker disappears, which sounds, of course, strange. The characters are different. They have some motivations, and you have choices that affect the course of the story. I didn't notice any global changes from them, but some missions and videos look different. Of course, there are several endings, and to find out all the options, you will have to replay the game more than once, choosing different options at forks and changing sides. The game is simply endless in duration, at least 40 to 50 hours. And if you clear out all the side quests and do not rush purely along the plot at a low difficulty level, then I am afraid to even imagine. In principle, the story does not cause any strong complaints, and in the middle it became really interesting what was going on. Although I have questions about the building of the local institute, and it is some kind of unexpected cyberpunk. But in general, I would not even find fault, if not for one nuance. Even a nuance. Towards the middle of the game, the quests break. Not in terms of narrative, if anything, but the scripts just stop working. In the optional task of talking to the professor with a boat, the door doesn't open, and I'm like, oh well, they'll fix it later, I'll move on with the story. You come to a village that asks for help, and there are both enemies and friendly stalkers sitting in a closed house, and nothing happens, only the sound of gunshots. You move away from it. The camp is gone. The merchant is gone too. Life will be more difficult. You get to a big story quest, and you start a dialogue that you can't exit. Honestly, I thought that my playthrough ended there, until the next patch, and went to bed after 30 hours of play. But a stalker is a stalker, and folk craftsmen, while I was sleeping, had already found a solution. As a result, I replayed everything that broke, doing what I hit a bunch of commands in the debug console. I went through the wall to the boat, handed him the quest, by the way. He started shooting at me, which means that something else went wrong in the system. I flew to the village, killed all the enemy NPC teams, activated the task for the story character, completed 3 small quests, then stood in the middle of the village, turned off collisions, teleported myself outside the zone, then returned back, turned on collisions, and only then returned to the main quest, where I completed the dialogue of the next console command. You can let them into the house and just watch, try to somehow negotiate, or choose a side. In the end, I get into a shootout with them, and they don't have time to kill the guy. I tell the story to the mechanic who gave me the quest, and he gives me a reward, but condemns my decision. And then, after a few hours of playing, I suddenly meet the kidnapped man already on his feet at the mechanics, and he thanks me for helping the monolith and not letting him die. If you do it differently, then he clearly won't be there. This is undoubtedly a script, and he was just spawned there, and he himself did not go. But the detail is nice. Or, here's a very small task. I meet 2 men drinking at the dump who promised to put a bottle of vodka in each of their comrades' 3 caches for radiation, but got drunk. They ask for help. I understand that this is a banal bring-get, but I agree. I will still run past it during the game. As a result, at one of the hiding places I meet this friend of theirs, who is interested in how long I've been hanging around here. I say that the drunks asked for vodka for radiation, and he laments that he did not ask for vodka, but for anti-radiation drugs, because he decided to quit drinking a few days ago. These Lyri are always getting him drunk, and he wants to go deeper into the zone. And here there is a choice, to give him my drugs or vodka. And I will not be surprised if, having chosen the latter, I would meet him drinking at the dump. And additional quests are often wrapped in such narrative wrappers, and they are really interesting to complete. I would tell a couple more examples, but I do not want to spoil them. And also, if you help to camp really, really hard, it turns green, and all the characters are happy to see you and address you differently. I don't know if this works with every camp, but with some, yes. The main plot is better here than in the previous parts. In any case, it is definitely more visually pleasing. There are full-fledged cutscenes directed by Nashuler, who himself appeared in the game. Most likely you know the movie hardcore. The pathos is sometimes excessive, of course, but nice. The action takes place after Call of Pripyat several years later. The plot is as follows. The main character is outside the zone. In the middle of the kitchen there is an abnormal explosion, and some discharged artifact appears. It will not be possible to sell it for a high price, but if you charge it in the zone, then it will be enough for a new apartment. And he decides to go there. A 5-minute adventure. Pop in and pop out. But something, of course, doesn't go according to plan, and we remain in Chernobyl, drawn into a story with mysterious scanners, a research institute, and much more. Where this artifact came from, they'll tell you along the way, as well as the origin of the zone as a whole. In short, the lore has been expanded normally, and it's so good. By the way, I don't remember artifacts losing their properties outside the zone before, but now it is. They work for a while, then they go out. This doesn't really ruin the idea of selling artifacts, because the demand for them will never go down now. You can let them into the house and just watch, try to somehow negotiate, or choose a side. In the end, I get into a shootout with them, and they don't have time to kill the guy. I tell the story to the mechanic who gave me the quest, and he gives me a reward, but condemns my decision. And then, after a few hours of playing, I suddenly meet the kidnapped man already on his feet at the mechanic's, and he thanks me for helping the monolith and not letting him die. If you do it differently, then he clearly won't be there. This is undoubtedly a script, and he was just spawned there, and he himself did not go. But the detail is nice. Or, here's a very small task. I meet two men drinking at the dump who promised to put a bottle of vodka in each of their comrades' 3 caches for radiation, but got drunk. They ask for help. I understand that this is a banal bring-get, but I agree. I will still run past it during the game. As a result, at one of the hiding places I meet this friend of theirs, who is interested in how long I've been hanging around here. I say that the drunks asked for vodka for radiation, and he laments that he did not ask for vodka, but for anti-radiation drugs, because he decided to quit drinking a few days ago. These Lyri are always getting him drunk, and he wants to go deeper into the zone. And here there is a choice, to give him my drugs or vodka. And I will not be surprised if, having chosen the latter, I would meet him drinking at the dump. And additional quests are often wrapped in such narrative wrappers, and they are really interesting to complete. I would tell a couple more examples, but I do not want to spoil them. And also, if you help to camp really hard, it turns green, and all the characters are happy to see you and address you differently. I don't know if this works with every camp, but with some, yes. The main plot is better here than in the previous parts. In any case, it is definitely more visually pleasing. There are full-fledged cutscenes directed by Nashuler, who himself appeared in the game. Most likely you know the movie Hardcore. The pathos is sometimes excessive, of course, but nice. The action takes place after Call of Pripyat several years later. The plot is as follows. The main character is outside the zone. In the middle of the kitchen there is an abnormal explosion, and some discharged artifact appears. It will not be possible to sell it for a high price, but if you charge it in the zone, then it will be enough for a new apartment. And he decides to go there. A 5-minute adventure. Pop in and pop out. But something, of course, doesn't go according to plan, and we remain in Chernobyl, drawn into a story with mysterious scanners, a research institute, and much more. Where this artifact came from, they'll tell you along the way, as well as the origin of the zone as a whole. In short, the lore has been expanded normally, and it's so good. By the way, I don't remember artifacts losing their properties outside the zone before, but now it is. They work for a while, then they go out. This doesn't really ruin the idea of selling artifacts, because the demand for them will never go down now. Well, you won't be able to shoot everyone from afar with a sniper rifle either, because enemies only appear in a certain radius around you, and there are simply no NPCs in the distance. That's probably why there are no binoculars, which have always been present in the series. And most importantly, the enemies have lost their identity. There are often situations when you simply don't understand who you're shooting at. Bandits can be dressed like freemen, stalkers can put on armor similar to the monolith, and so on. At night, it's generally unclear what's going on. You need to navigate by the compass at the top of the screen, and be prepared for the fact that if you accidentally get there in your own way, at best you'll have to engage in battle, and at worst you'll fail an important quest. When searching corpses, you'll never understand which group they belong to, although this was always indicated before. This only destroys the reality of the local world, forcing you to treat both enemies and allies as faceless dummies. Outside the main story and additional quests, there are only unexpected spawns and stalkers constantly sitting at bases, who, although they tell heartfelt stories, will never go to the zone on their own business. And this is very bad. Sometimes, not often, something curious happens, like an attack on the base by mutants. but I saw this only twice in about 40 hours, and this is some kind of accident. In order for the world to feel alive, something else works here. Quests and the plot. And the additional tasks turned out to be really interesting. The bartenders have the standard kill, clean up, find. But in the world, there are really cool ones. I will give a couple as examples so as not to spoil too much. The mechanic asks me to go look for the diggers who are bringing him iron, but they haven't been in touch for a while. I follow the coordinates and reach a basement filled with corpses of poor guys, pierced by rebar and scattered all over the dungeon. One of them survived, and I can give him a first aid kit, or not. I decide to help. The scared Paragnac tells me that they met a monolithist with empty eyes in the basement, who scattered them like rag dolls and dragged one of them to his lair to make a zombie. He asks me to rescue or finish off his friend. I agree. I go to an abandoned house near the forest. The doors are locked, the windows are boarded up, but there is a closed barn nearby. I knock down the lock, find an underground tunnel leading to the house. I make my way there and see a poor guy lying on a bed and hear some strange prayer. He moans that someone is in the attic. I want to throw a grenade there, but I decide to go up first. And yes, there really is a guy sitting there praying with whom I can talk. He tells that he is a former monolithist but does not remember his past at all. A group of diggers was killed by a poltergeist, and he did not have time to help them, but dragged a survivor to patch him up. I remember that I really saw the corpse of a mutant in that basement and decide to believe him. Then stalkers come to the hut, called by the guy I saved with the first aid kit, and shout for the monolithist to come out. You can spend a lot of boxes of ammo on it. Why did they make it so unkillable? The mystery of the zone. The most terrifying monster for me was the jerboas. You can hardly hit them with a knife, it's wildly annoying, so you have to waste ammo. In general, the shootouts in the second part are quite different from the original and have become more dynamic, especially with people. And this is a double-edged sword. On the one hand, shooting has become more convenient, and the bullets fly where you aim, without a random scatter, and a shot to the head knocks out any enemy without a helmet. So even the very first Makarov pistol, absolutely useless in the previous parts, is quite a formidable weapon here. Especially when you loaded armor-piercing rounds. The battles have become faster and more dynamic. You can peek out from around the corner automatically, and the animations are pleasantly pleasing. There are sights, silencers, etc. You have to take care of the guns and fix them in time, otherwise you'll find yourself in an unpleasant situation, with a jammed shotgun at the most inopportune moment. Damn, bad timing. On the other hand, the weapons here feel somehow very impersonal, as if you were playing Far Cry 3, and the enemies behave in the most unpredictable way. And this is not a compliment at all, because they are stupid. When there are few enemies, it's still somehow interesting. They throw grenades, sometimes try to get around you to hit you with the butt, and even periodically use cover. But when there is a crowd of them, a circus begins. Someone starts looking at the wall. Someone throws a grenade under themselves. Someone forgets that there is a fight. Some get stuck in each other, and someone fires like a sniper into your forehead from half a location away. If there were stupidities in the previous parts, then this was understandable. There, the AI took into account a bunch of different factors, and the simulation system worked. Everything could change at any second. But here, none of that, and no excuses for stupid enemies either. With all that, it's clear that the intelligence here is made in some complex and roundabout way. I once killed an enemy and found out that he fell asleep. I killed a dude, and he was sleeping. Bitch, what? Snoring started playing next to him, and it was impossible to search him. How did that happen? Who the hell knows? Maybe the simulation was planned after all, and in the end, when it was cut, there was a pile of some complex connections and systems left, which trigger at unexpected moments. There are also timid attempts at stealth and the ability to drag bodies on the spot. But all this almost never works. Yes, you can stab someone from behind. The enemies don't pay attention, even if you shine a flashlight at them from behind, but a maximum of 2. Then you will be noticed 100%, sometimes even through the wall. Hypothetically, The noise that the player makes is taken into account here because there is an indicator, but it does not work. And what can I say? Enemies sometimes just go through doors. In some plot moments, it is still possible to get to the point unnoticed, but only by mercilessly spamming quick saves, remembering where each enemy is, raking out your inventory, freeing up space for loot, taking only the weapons you'll need and ammo for them, deciding how many first aid kits and bandages to take with you, figuring out the route on your PDA, how to manage to complete a couple of quests during the day, and running into the base at night so as not to wander around in the dark, risking running into a pack of wild boars or a bloodsucker? Although running into is not quite the right word, because they'll just spawn behind you. And anyway, you can't see a damn thing here at night, and I couldn't find any NVGs, so you try to sleep in the evening. Such dimensions don't always play into your hands and often create additional unjustified difficulties. Besides the fact that sometimes everything turns into a simulator of contemplating the views and walking, which many will not like, at some point a large chain of quests begins, and you find yourself in a remote corner of the map with a backpack filled to the brim, a broken weapon and suit, and you are faced with a choice. Drag yourself for about 30 minutes of real time to the merchant, with a wild excess of mineral water and energy, replenishing stamina, or risk going further along the plot in the hope of stumbling upon some new camp or at least one of the chests, from which things are magically teleported to others. And of course, you do not find any camp. Such situations are very common, and considering that some bases with merchants and mechanics disappear during the course of the story, they become commonplace. For stalkers in general, it has always been normal when you can barely drag backpacks with a bunch of items. But here the scale is different and the need is acute. You need to trade, because they ask for a lot of money to repair weapons. They pay little for quests and for artifacts, good weapons and suits. It's normal. That's why I strongly advise against selling artifacts that increase the maximum weight you can drag. You will regret it. It was especially annoying when I found a heavy RPG and carried it across half the map for about 50 minutes. In the end, I decided to throw it in someone's cache in a rickety guardhouse to pick it up later. There turned out to be a bloodsucker's lair, and I spent all the shotgun shells, which I also left in the cache and continued on my way without it, hoping that I would not meet any more mutants. By the way, there are quite a few of them here, starting from the standard packs of dogs, which now try to hide if they can't reach the player on a hill, boars, snorks, and those who have learned to jump. Plotty ending with a new deer, calling other mutants to help him, and finally a cat that has appeared, whose meowing causes drowsiness. Meeting her in an abandoned church during a storm was quite stressful. Bayurs now don't just run and grunt, tearing weapons out of the player's hands. It can easily fall through textures, and you'll have to load, by the way. Dog Crucian Carp. Where's the weapon? Fight. But they can also shoot, raising the machine gun into the air. Many complain about the durability of bloodsuckers, but I didn't have any particular problems with them. But the controller absorbs bullets worse than bosses because of the division. The territory is simply filled to capacity with unique locations, giant anomalies, caves, and other things. Outwardly, all of this lives and breathes. Trees creak, lightning flashes, the wind drives dry leaves along the roads, birds caw and frogs swim in the lakes. Clouds of dust rush through the night and the howling of mutants can be heard. And at first glance, the locations look very nice. It is clear that the light is set manually everywhere. Objects are laid out without any procedural generation, and there is an infinite number of unique models. Very often, you just want to stand and look at how everything is laid out here. If you compare the same location, the second part will win, which is not surprising after 15 years. But the technological level and stability of the picture raise big questions. There was also a breakthrough light in the clear sky, and I won't even mention the shadows. They were cast by every object. Grates, people, beds, boxes, and everything else. There are no shadows from the flashlight here. None. And it would seem, so what? Why are you so attached? But it works on a subconscious level. You look without a flashlight, everything seems fine. You turn it on, and the picture immediately becomes somehow flat, But if lightning strikes near you, then there will be shadows, and cool ones at that. It turns out that they specifically turned off the shadows from the flashlight for optimization. A very controversial decision, because in the first S.T.A.L.K.E.R, even flashes from gunshots made all objects cast shadows. And there are no flowers on the wall in complete darkness, and it looks terribly ridiculous. Although later, as the game progresses, they appeared for some reason. It's unclear how it works. There are plenty of visual and other bugs in the game, and they often occur in the same locations. They were probably made at the last minute. Textures overlap and flicker, and objects appear as abruptly as possible. Many boxes disappear for a second and only then turn into broken boards. A weapon that was never there suddenly appears in the inventory. What? How did this happen? Where the hell did this come from? People fall through floors and so on. Periodically, the amount of some flares, grids, and visual garbage becomes physically painful. And I played on maximum graphics settings, by the way, at 40 to 70. However, without DLSS and FPISA frame generation, the frames went below 40, and I had to turn this thing on and limit the frames from 6 to 10. As a result, there were almost no drops. But at the same time, of course, upscale mercilessly blurred the picture at times and produced artifacts on shiny surfaces. Well, and once every 3 to 4 hours, something in the engine got clogged, and such a logodrome began that it was necessary to restart. Honestly, such a number of bugs is not surprising, because the new zone is so huge that the path to the quest point can take several game days, that is from 40 minutes. And long forays have to be carefully planned. Thunder rumbles. Everything lights up with orange and red shades. The game starts to slow down due to the number of objects. DLSS blurs the picture into soap, and NPC passes through me. But I think this is forgivable. After all, the zone finally gave me a cool situation outside of any quests, like in the previous parts of the series. And then the game freezes and crashes with an error to the desktop. Third example. In the middle of the field, a Phi dog attacks me, and I manage to crawl onto an old wooden tower. Suddenly shots are heard, and bandits unconsciously come to the rescue. I decide to wait until they deal with you and the mutant, and finish off the rest. But before I approached the tower, there was no one around. Of course, this is an unplanned situation, but both the dog and the bandit simply spawned behind my back. And almost always the scenario repeated itself. If someone attacked you, rest assured that he appeared right behind you, and someone else already appears nearby in an open field to participate in this movement. Afterwards, you will never meet the heroes of such events. These 3 examples perfectly convey what S.T.A.L.K.E.R 2 turned out to be: the heart of Chernobyl, released 15 years after Call of Pripyat. Atmospheric, but buggy to the point of impossibility, and completely lost that very simulation. But the desire to close the game and never launch it again did not arise in me. Not at the 20th, nor at the 30th, nor at the 40th hour. In places I cursed, got irritated, but confidently continued to move deeper into the exclusion zone. How did this happen? I'll tell you now. The gameplay in the new part is absolutely no different from the previous ones. Everything is the same. We take quests from NPCs, go and complete them, drink vodka for radiation, snack on sausage in return for rewards, while simultaneously advancing along the main plot, shooting with opponents, fighting off mutants, and earning a living by searching for artifacts and trading in order to repair tired body armor and weapons. Except that the map is now seamless and simply gigantic. It is clearly larger than the total area of all previous parts, and what is nice, this did not affect the quality of development in any way. The layout and content of old locations have changed a lot, but those familiar with the previous parts will feel at home in some places and remember the events that happened here earlier. The map is very interesting to explore. Examine all sorts of small details. Look into dilapidated buildings and go down into dark basements, stumbling upon caches hidden in secluded corners. It's hard to pass by a huge translucent ball of gravitational anomaly, which, pulsating, bends trees, pulling them towards itself, and then pushes them back because there's probably some rare artifact there, and you can put it in a container on your belt or sell it for a good price. How can you not jump into a teleporter to check where it will take you, or not climb a lonely rickety tower in the swamps to examine the location around you in search of something interesting? After all, it will 100% be found. This is not Starfield with its generated deserts. Hello, everyone. The second Stalker has a very unpleasant and conflicting background, for obvious reasons. Stop Game is a gaming channel, and the review will only talk about the game. But before that, I want to clarify something. During the playthrough, I hoped that in the end I would say that there is no political subtext in the game content or plot. I did not encounter it. But in the end, they found a song with Russophobic, offensive content which you probably heard from various publics. I also found out about it there because either I simply did not listen to what was playing on the game radio, or I did not come across it. It is no longer possible to call the content of S.T.A.L.K.E.R too neutral, although it was close. Someone in the GSC company could not stand it, and now this ugly introduction is here. In the most visible place right before the beginning. And what to do with this information is up to you. But despite all this background, if you want to discuss politics, there are many other platforms and channels where it is welcome. Thank you. Now I will move on to the review. The S.T.A.L.K.E.R series has always been based on 3 components: the atmosphere, bugs, and the simulation of life alive, which had no analogs anywhere. Bandits, free stalkers, and groups wandered between camps, looted enemies, and were processed by the system, even when the player was not nearby. If he was in another location, something happened in the neighboring one, albeit according to very simplified calculations. You could find a stalker, alive or dead, who was helped a long time ago in a completely different place. Sometimes alive worked frankly poorly, but generated unique situations, for which the games were forgiven for a weak plot, bugs, crashes, and glitches. But what of this remained in the second part? Here are a couple of moments. I walk through the swamp, carefully avoiding a barely noticeable anomaly consisting of thousands of small glass fragments hanging in the air. Suddenly, I hear the rustling of bushes behind me, and suddenly, a giant 2-headed chimera knocks me down. While it runs for another attack, I quickly jump up and use the first aid kit, trying to figure out what to do next. There are dozens of kilograms of loot in my backpack, which I have been collecting for several hours, and I will not be able to escape. And then I hear the sound of an emission starting. A mutant roars behind me, lightning flashes, and I, desperately swallowing energy drinks, weave through the tall grass trying to get to the saving hut. This is the call I was waiting for. Could it be that the very same Alive 2.0 system that is supposed to generate such situations has worked? This is a script. I tried to change at least something, but the chimera always spawns in one spot and is immortal. The emission starts at the right time, and you can only hide from danger in a certain place. This is the second example of an unprepared situation. Dump. The radio warns about the beginning of the emission. Stalkers in the area quickly gather at the entrance of the shelter, breaking into a run in the process.